Luckily, there's music, and it's telling you something.
The wars are endless. The surveillance is done, and you never say. You never said a word. You never said a word. It's all going to shit now. And you never say a word.
It's the new hit single from the pacifist MTK. You never say a word. Here on your station with the mostest. Why do I have... Today has been a frustrating day on many counts. And among them is a frustration because I was watching Oliver Stone's JFK, and in the middle of it, I went to Google some facts that the character he used Donald Sutherland for, which everybody has made so much about when he was doing it. Mr. X, the DC insider who ends up being the carrier of a lot of data that's, I think, uncorroborated. That's a bold claim, that he was going to end the war. And that's what got him killed. So I was Googling the real players, and that led me to watch a movie I haven't seen in a long time. So I have a lot of data in my noggin. I've been reading and watching and doing journalism for 30 years. More, really. And I got a pretty good memory, too. So a lot of the time, I'm not even sharing what's going on because it's not either relevant or perhaps it's because it's not timely. Things being not timely is a method of censorship too, or propaganda tool. I mean, a way to make something that's important be hidden further is by masking it, right? So that's a masking technique. But anyway, there are some guys who are a little older than me who have memories of the Kennedy assassination. And when I was a teenager, I became fascinated with the work of Jim Garrison. So when Stone's movie came out, I was already among the people who considered the government analysis of what happened on November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas to be sorely problematic, flawed, and a clear cover-up. So the Stone film for us, our group, was the thing that took it to a slightly bigger level of people. That would have been in 1992, right? 91. So from the time the events happened in 63 to the time of that movie in 91, public discourse over the assassination of Kennedy was divided into two categories, only two. And that division was executed by the government, who dictated it to the military, to the media, and the media delivered what the perceived of truth was. And amidst that, if you look at the material, there are things that go against the laws of physics. And the more you look at it, the more the questions arise, right? So there was a guy in the 1990s. He made them himself. He made these videotapes, and they were called JFK 2. And I watched them, studied them, looked up the material he was talking about, found it quite rational. And I was thinking to myself, I watched that several times, that material, and I never really talked to anyone about it. Why? I did not want to be branded conspiratorial, is probably the biggest reason why. I don't know if that's cowardice or if that's ambition. If I want to climb, I'm going to keep my mouth shut about this, because I'm not going to change these people's minds, and it brands me as a conspiratorial type of thinker, right? Which I'm not. What I am is a journalist and a person who collects data, analyzes it using predominantly scientific methods, but also, investigative ones, hunches, statistics, and knowing people. The odds on how people behave are part of investigative, more subjective things as well. And I had always hoped that I would be able to be taken seriously if I was discussing something that was outside the national narrative. And under 3 occasions, I intersected with the national narrative, and it got loud. And I lost in the vernacular every time. And it made me look like more of an outsider and less of a person who was a journalist and happened to cling onto this thing because nobody else is looking at it type of an angle. The election of 2000, the election of 2004, and the 9/11 events, I think. Now, amidst all the work I do, these are not my primary focus, but I faced each of them with the same intensity that I do everything that I really pursue. And as other people abandoned it, I stayed with it longer. And so the vision it gave me of power in the United States, of our elections process in the United States, of just everything, was intensely disheartening. You can liken it to Network, when the exec finally breaks it to the guy, hey man, you're only good to us as long as these ratings do whatever they do, You're not ultimately going to peel the curtain back. And I went to YouTube and I watched it again, the JFK 2. Hadn't seen it in years. And he has an updated one now. There's like 3 of them now. One from 7 years ago, one from 5 years ago, one from a year ago. I don't know the producer at all of this material, but the implication of it is far beyond the readily available discourse about the Kennedy assassination and the Bush family. And I think part of the problem here is that, being a journalist and a writer, big part of that for me was about getting at truth, and leaving religion behind because of science is about getting to truths, and being a journalist with a tape recorder and going and covering stuff and asking people questions was about getting the truth so I could tell the truth, And when you're a person who does that, like I've been and am, when there's some things that seem like they're untrue and they're just sitting there, and the only reason nobody's discussing them is because they're either afraid of them or they've been lied to with such ferocity that they've bought a propagandized viewpoint and they're just clinging to it, or they're afraid sometimes to have thoughts, which is a crazy thing in the world we live in today. I think people are afraid to have thoughts because of statements by our government and by our neighbors and by our people on Facebook. And that should never be true. That's something that all arts are attempting to combat. You should think critically and by yourself about the world and the universe you inhabit. You should take advantage of the library, first of all, and parts of the internet that are academic in nature and free, and people who will educate you about anything you want to know about. You can learn about anything at the library. And you don't have to become an expert in it, but at least you can understand the world your way. And if you understand the world and you have questions about it, then you keep pursuing those questions. And then you come to a point where you have a question that no one can answer. You might be the author of that creative moment in the human culture. That would be awesome, right? It doesn't happen often, but it's cool. But you can't get there if you're afraid to have thoughts. You can't get there if you're afraid to question. You must question authority. I think we need to make a question authority. Remember the old question authority bumper sticker? We should order one of those. Or make one. We have some cardstock around here somewhere, don't we? So if you do that, like I have, and then you also get a chance, like I have had, to be in the face of power and see how it really operates, and you opt out of keeping quiet so you can pursue your ambitions, the result is you're isolated by your truths. Now, that's okay. That's okay. I think that's okay. But it'd be nice to have friends who share your truths, right? So a good example is a community of socialists that you can find on Twitter. They're quick to root out people who are frauds and plants and disinformation, which I like. They are beautiful expressions for peace and material. And, I think each of us knows we're alone and in a tiny minority, but we feel less so when we communicate those ideas. But if you're in a circle of 10 people who are doing that with each other, each of maybe reaches another 50, 100,000, you're a drop in the bucket of influence that Facebook is having, Instagram is having, Snapchat. And so the attractiveness to the message cannot be sped up and made rapid. That's the difficulty. It takes more effort to comprehend the truths behind the events of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, a coup d'etat in this country, or of his brother, or of the events of 9/11. Or of the elections of 2000 and 2004. Or for that matter, what we're doing now with regard to the election of DJT. In point of fact, the 21st century millennium has been hijacked by a faction. This faction can be identified and laid out. And if we had done it right, we would have investigated things as crimes instead of as acts of war. Bush and his government would have been found culpable. Why did you fail so spectacularly? You failed more epically, more spectacularly than any president in history, George W. Bush and your administration. Rumsfeld, your military failed. That was the greatest failure of American military and might and government in the history of this country. In the space of 6 hours, you obliterated the failure of the Vietnam War. That's what happened there. So, investigating things like a crime changes the tenor and brings that passion for killing and murder and vengeance down, which is all unjust, by the way. It is a barbaric emotion that needs to be controlled, not one to be fed. And the Bush family hijacked our country and has left us with a narrow, contained version of the USA that I grew up in that's horrible, mean-spirited, nobody feels free. The vast majority are too poor living paycheck to paycheck to even function, much less to have thoughts of freedom. And the oppressors want to be more oppressive. That's how it feels now. What they have wrought upon us with their endless wars, total surveillance of us, complete domination and manipulation of the election process, replacing all the judges with cronies. But this has been a shitty millennium. This is so far let's see, 0 to 1,000 is 1, 1,000 to 2,000. The third millennium of this guy you guys call Christ is shit. It's shitty. The human species is on the verge of devastating climactic impact. Tensions between people are petty and bitter. Violence is on the rise. Violence as a solution for things is being discussed again. People are depressed and taking so many drugs. And they're avoiding the truth of the circumstance. That the human population explosion. We are little children of the human population explosion. It happened. We are going to be 10 billion. We have to learn to govern ourselves differently. The golden age of humanity is over. Now we have to learn to care for one another, to reduce our carbon footprint, to change our behaviors to save the planet. That's the only option. The human population explosion. We went from 1 billion to 7 billion in the space of 150 years. Before we figured that out, slowed it down. We're still going to hit 10 billion, but we're probably going to top off around 10 billion. So between 7 billion and 10 billion, these people are saying, well, here's how we solve that. We just get into wars with anybody we don't like and kill them off. What about those folks over there? They're not bad or anything. They're just poor. They don't have anything. Well, die off. It's an insane, inhumane, and barbaric viewpoint. So mythos that are coming out of those people's minds are all apocalyptic visions. Thanos snaps his fingers and half the population dies. Here's another apocalyptic vision. They're running to negate, and that is not the way to do this. That is a bailout process of the mind. That's what takes us to violence always, is the bailing out to violence. It's much harder to change yourself, educate yourself, educate others, and change society. That is much, much harder. Individual will for things, your willfulness in material and materialism is killing the planet if you're doing it wrong. People need to confront that. It is not even about the minuscule day-to-day politics anymore. It's far from that. The generation below me, who they deride so much, which I find just so... I feel really bad for people in their 20s and 30s because of the way they're derided and what they've been handed. They were handed garbage, and then they're being mocked for being garbage-headed. And handed lies, massive lies, artifices. You can't raise a person in a diorama and then expect them to function in the world. That's not ever going to work. So what do? We have academics who are doing amazing work in the sciences, amazing work in areas, technological areas. We have less scientists or regular folk, doctors, professionals, dealing with the societal crisis that is here. If you opt out of capitalism's thing, as I've done, you are not gonna. The message is not going to be communicated very far, I don't think. Why'd the music stop? I hate when we're dry. These are all just tracks I made with the Music Maker app, by the way. German company out of 2013, Music Maker Jam for your Android phone. Layers and layers of artificial value in culture too, coming from this tech. You have an iPhone. I have an iPhone 10. I have an iPhone 7. I have an Android phone. I have a Xbox, but I don't have a 160-inch screen. I have a nice set of headphones, but tons of gadgets. So we have come up with a new word for our collage, which is coming along really well, I think, personally. I wonder if I can still do collage with you while moving this stuff around. I think I can. Yeah, so you can see I'm really liking how the double feathers business looks. This thing is cool looking. So his head is much more, it gives him a more kind of fantastic aspect. See that? I don't know if you're getting that or not, but that's a double layer. And we could triple layer it with a few cuts. So I've trimmed these down. It could be possible to make a triple layer here that makes sense. It would give him a cheek. Triple the feathers. And that bit of cheek that you've lost would be back. This is what's going on. See that? It's not quite right, but you get the basic idea. It's a little tricky. I'm going to have to trim the edges. So that is cool. And then in terms of we were talking about the text a text that's going to go with it. I think we're going with Molka Hualtiloya. Molka Hualtiloya. Molka Hualtiloya is the Nahuatl word for words, well, syllables, for they were made to forget it. Molka Hualtiloya, they were made to forget it. Molka Hualtiloya, they were made to forget it. Is what I think this incarnation of Moctezuma II, this particular incarnation of Moctezuma II is going to be stating Molka Hualtiloya. They were made to forget it. They were made to forget it. How do you make someone to forget something? Well, we've just talked about it. How do you make someone forget the facts of the September 11th attacks? How do you make someone forget what happened in the election of 2000? How do you make someone forget what happened on the morning in Dallas? How do you make someone forget the 2004 election or the 2016 election? Molka Hualtiloya is going to be the message of my incarnation of Moctezuma II. Kind of excited about that. We've come to the end of the half hour. Today has been a complete mess. Today has been a complete mess. But if you go to YouTube and you put in JFK2, like II2, Roman numeral 2, and you watch the 2-hour-long video that's kind of clunky and it's a little annoying sometimes, hard to watch, put together by that fella, you will be isolated by it, like I am. Or you will be someone willing to let me talk with you about that amongst the realm of possibilities in our pursuits of truth. It isn't important today, per se, but it came up today. And so I spent some time focusing on it again to remind myself what I believe and know, or think I know, or know that I don't know about certain events from months and even years, I would say now, of research. And being with Pacifica Radio, when I was with them, tons of opportunity to interview, hundreds of people about many different topics. Molka Hualtiloya. Molka Hualtiloya.